Welcome to the next edition of the Pigskins and Politics podcast, the only podcast that combines two topics that go together like Boba Fett and Sarlacc pits. That's for all my Mandalorian fans out there. The previous opposite items were food items, and I can't just always bring on food. Let's talk a little something. And watching the most recent Mandalorian episode, Boba Fett makes an appearance. Spoiler alert. So obviously he's still alive. So that is for all my Star Wars fans out there. So as I mentioned, welcome to the Pigskins and Politics podcast. My name is Brian McFadden. We've got a separate politics podcast that we will drop after this. This one is the football episode. Make sure to stick around for the separate politics chat, which will be in an episode, should be dropping in about a couple days. What we're going to go over for today. So format for this episode is going to be a little different than past episodes. This is a new podcast where we're working on the fly. We're adaptable. What we're going to do is we're going to start with some NFL news. We're going to have a little bit longer of a discussion with my guest, who I'll introduce shortly. We're going to give you an update on the current playoff standings, talk a little bit about the games, and then we're going to preview all of the Week 14 games coming up, make picks for each of those games, and then we're going to end it with some fantasy football talk. My guest today has some interesting insight into fantasy football. We're going to hear from him shortly. And we're going to finish it off with some weekly, daily fantasy picks at each position, along with some other general fantasy advice. So let's go ahead and welcome my guest today, Jay Averill. Welcome to the Pigskins and Politics podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So I got to tell the listeners how you came to be on the PPP. I've been promoting this on Facebook and various social media, and I get a message from someone I've been Facebook friends with for a long time, and that is your wife, Tiffany. And she said, your podcast idea, you got to get my husband on. You just have like that. He talks about two things, football and politics. Let me hook you up. So we were introduced, had a great conversation, knew right away that you'd be great for the pod, and super excited to have you. How you feeling? You ready?
I'm feeling great. Let's go.
Awesome. Why don't give just a little bit of an introduction about yourself? Obviously, your football allegiance, which we will talk about, and kind of a little bit about the Jay experience.
Yeah, no, I'm a diehard 49ers fan. Grew up in the Bay Area. I know you're out there now. I grew up in San Mateo. That's where I met my wife. We worked in the video game industry together, which, again, kind of how you met my wife. Played video games. We moved out here.
I guess we can't gloss over the nerdy aspect of that. Is that yes, I met his wife Tiffany playing Star Wars Galaxy, which was an MMO way back in the day. I want to say like 15 years ago. And yeah, as those, I mean, obviously I led with a Boba Fett reference, so I am a Star Wars nerd. Get used to it, and yet that's how we met.
Well, and talk about two things that don't go very well together. So working in the video games industry, I didn't have a whole lot of sports fans to interact with.
Right.
Those two do not go so well together. So nice to meet a fellow mind.
Spoiler alert, next week the two items will be video games and football. Go ahead.
There you go. I generally, that's why I went to work where I did, because I could combine video games and football.
Nice. Awesome. That sounds like an amazing place to be. So you ready to jump into some NFL chat to get started?
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. So the first thing I want to start with is, so I lived in New York City for 12 years, and as a Dolphins fan, the Jets are a team that I know intimately and follow mainly for entertainment purposes. And so recently, the Jets lost their game. We'll talk about the details of that against the Las Vegas Raiders, and immediately fired their defensive coordinator, Greg Williams. So Adam Gase was the head coach. He brought on Greg Williams at the start of last season. So they're only 2 seasons in to be the defensive coordinator. He has a lot of experience, was the interim coach for the Browns last year or 2 years ago after Freddie Kitchens got fired. And this was a marriage that really didn't last. So here's how it ended, which I found fascinating. So the Jets actually had the lead. So they are cruising to their what looked to be their first victory of the season. 5 seconds left, 3rd and 10. The Raiders have the ball, 3rd and 10 near midfield. Jets are up by 4. So holy crap, they're actually going to win a game.
No.
And no, of course not. It's the Jets. It's an Adam Gase-led Jets team. So what happens is the Jets call a zero blitz. So what a zero blitz is, it means that there's no safeties over top. It's basically all-out blitz. If you've played Madden, but you're not as familiar with the terms, an all-out blitz. So there's no safety help. The corners are all isolated one-on-one with their receivers. The problem is one of those receivers runs a 4.2 40, and that's rookie Henry Ruggs. So Derek Carr just throws it up, 46-yard touchdown with 5 seconds on the clock. Jets lose. I mean, what is there to say to this? 3rd and 10 near midfield. All you have one objective: just keep them out of the end zone. They can't even win. They can't even tie with the field goal. The Jets were up by 4. What are your thoughts on this?
Look, it's hard to argue with the firing. I guess my only thought process behind that would be, if you're Adam Gase, you're a dead man walking. You have no business having your job now. Do you really want to burn a bridge 4 weeks before you lose your job? You don't know where you're going to need. You don't know when.
Greg Williams.
Yeah, Greg Williams. You don't know when Greg Williams is going to wind up having, being in a position somewhere where he can hire you. I think it was kind of a poor look to make him look like the fall guy. Yes, he made the call, but I have to think the head coach had some sign off on it. If he really wanted to jump in, if he wanted that responsibility, he could have jumped in and made the call. At that point, he's your guy. Like I said, not a good call, obviously, but they haven't made a good call all year. So to fire your defensive coordinator for that one call, I don't know that it was the greatest decision. Greg Williams certainly has a better reputation in the league than Adam Gase. Greg Williams will find another job. Adam Gase, I'm not so sure about.
I completely agree with that. I actually think that based on his tenure in Miami, yes, he had the one playoff year, but the team fell apart after that. And to see the amount of players that used to play for Gase that have become superstars elsewhere. You think of Kenyon Drake and the year he had at the end last season in Arizona. You think of obviously Ryan Tannehill having a resurgence in his career. Devontae Parker putting up the numbers we always thought he would once Gase left, and then of course Gase's absolutely awful Jets tenure. I can't see anybody giving him any type of role. He was brought in there primarily to be a quarterback whisperer, quote unquote, to Sam Darnold, and he actually himself. So Gase just said, "Oh, I failed. I didn't develop him." Yep, dude, that was your one job.
Well, and that made me wonder, is he trying to get fired? Is he trying to get out of there before the end of the season? I mean, at this point, he's going to get paid one way or the other. He's got a contract. They're going to have to pay him and buy him out. Is he just trying to get out? He knows he's a dead man walking.
Right, he does. Then why fire Williams,
exactly.
First of all? Second of all, why? I mean, Greg Williams has a reputation for being aggressive. That's his, Bounty Gate back when he was with the Saints. So he's the type that he'll blitz you all day long. But this is the one scenario. This is football 101. If you're a Madden player and you've never watched, but you don't do an all-out blitz when you have the lead by 4 with 5 seconds left.
On the 50-yard line.
On the 50-yard line, they're out of field goal. Just freaking rush 3 and drop 8 and whatever. Keep them out of the end zone. That's it. What is he thinking? You think he knew it? Like, look, I'm done. I'm not going to be the defense coordinator much longer. Let's just screw it. Let's just.
I think that's just Greg Williams. He didn't think his guys covered. He thought he was just going to get the sack in the game, or at least he was willing to take that gamble. That's Greg Williams, though. You know you're getting that when you hire him.
This is true, and that's the problem. Is you knew you were getting that, and you should have known what you were getting with Gase. And I think that it seems they're going to keep him for the rest of the season at this point, which is insane. But hey, maybe you want Trevor Lawrence. Maybe you figure keeping Gates in there is going to help you lose the rest of the last 4 games, go 0-16, have that mark on your legacy, but at least you get to have a once in a lifetime quarterback prospect.
Hey, if that happens, what happens to Darnold?
Well, that's the other question. I mean, I think his days are numbered in New York. Unfortunately, I'm not saying his time is done as an NFL prospect.
Right.
He showed a lot of promise in his rookie year, especially at the end as he started to develop, basically before they brought on Gase. And he had the whole thing with mono last year. Just so he's caught some bad breaks, but he has severely regressed this year. Similar to Carson Wentz, which I think it's mental. But they've got the tools. Maybe he needs to change the scenery. Dare I say he ends up in New England and Belichick finds a resurgence. I don't even want to put that in the universe. Please, pretend I didn't say that.
I don't know what the Niners are going to do with Jimmy G, and I'm totally willing to talk about that later. But I wouldn't be opposed to them giving Sam Darnold a shot.
Sure, certainly. I mean, you've got that talent. He's still on his rookie contract. Right. I mean, you don't have Wentz is a bigger issue because he's re-signed. He's got this mega deal. But there's going to be a lot of teams out there. The Niners are certainly one of them where they could take a shot on a first-round draft pick who maybe was just in a bad situation. Look what Tannehill did. And he was with Gase for 3 years, and he was not a rookie, and he'd been in the league a long time. Look at what he has done with Tennessee. So we will keep you all posted on that. Speaking of head coaches whose seats are red hot on fire, so the Chargers got absolutely destroyed by New England, 45-0. We actually talked on the podcast last week, floating around a few different names of coaches who are likely on the hot seat or who could be next. This was right after the Lions fired Matt Patricia and GM Bob Quinn. And Anthony Lynn is certainly next up, it seems. Actually, there were some reports out there that I think from Ian Rappaport that he is very much on the chopping block. But now I've seen reports that they're going to wait until the end of the year, that they want to give him a chance to finish the season and then evaluate him. So it doesn't look like he's going to get the axe during the season. But man, these last 2 weeks. So after that, the finish against the Bills, the Buffalo Bills, where the sequence at the end of the game when they're trying to, there's no time left. They get a Hail Mary to the 2. They run the ball up the middle, stuffed, clock's ticking. They call a QB sneak. The field goal team goes off the field. They call a QB sneak, but the offensive line drops into pass protection. So Herbert's trying to sneak it, and it's just a mess. And then this week, just an absolute clobbering against a New England team that's the worst New England team they've had in decades. It's just not a good look. You've got a stud quarterback in Justin Herbert, who had his worst game because Belichick
destroys rookie quarterbacks.
Give me rookie quarterbacks all day long, right? And they need to make a change. Look, Anthony Lynn is a great guy. I mentioned it last week. Watching him on Hard Knocks, he's the kind of coach that a lot of players would want to play for. But something he's doing isn't working.
I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know who the coordinators are in San Diego. But I'll tell you who Anthony Lynn reminds me of. Again, going back to the Niners, was Mike Singletary when he was the head coach. And at first, I really liked the hire because he had, I thought, the one talent that you want out of any head coach, and that's he'd get his players to do whatever he told them to do. They'd run through a wall, they'd jump on a grenade, whatever you wanted them to do.
Motivational.
Yeah. Right. But he didn't know what to tell them how to do, or he didn't know what to tell them to do. And the coordinators he had with them were not pro enough. He just didn't have the X's and O's side of it. So again, they do whatever he told them, but he had no idea what to tell them to do. And so it just didn't work out. And that's kind of how I feel when I watch Anthony Lynn or I hear him talk or just his overall coaching style. He just seems a little bit in over his depth right now.
I think you need a combination. You need a way to motivate players and to get them to follow you, either through winning, because nobody's going to sit there and tell me Belichick is a master motivator, but they understand that his system works, and they understand that if they do what he tells them in practice, in games, and whatever strategy he cooks up, it's going to result in wins more often than not. Or you get the Sean McVays who are just fired up and everybody let's go to war. But McVay is also a mastermind on the offensive side of the ball with strategy. He made some great hires on the coordinator side. But then you get these other coaches that, they'll fire you up. Rex Ryan's a good example, right? People would love to play for Rex Ryan, but he just wasn't getting it done strategically. So I see a similar path for Lynn here.
I mean, Jim Harbaugh is another one too. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's had some success, but after 3 or 4 years, the rah-rah becomes old. That's why every kid he has everywhere, 4 years, and then he's out. Michigan looks like it's going to last 5.
People stop following the rah-rah if they're losing.
Right.
Nobody wants a rah-rah. Nobody wants to get pumped up just to keep losing. So I do believe that Lynn will get fired. It seems it'll be at the end of the season. We will have to see where he lands. I will say, somebody was asking me recently, well, who do you think would be a good head coach candidate for the Chargers? And Eric Bieniemy came to mind, specifically because he worked with Patrick Mahomes. He was there when they drafted him. He's worked with Mahomes since the beginning. He's the number one head coaching candidate for all the teams, I would say, at this point. He's offensive coordinator for the Chiefs. He's the name in demand, but specifically because Herbert has some Mahomes-like qualities. He's extremely intelligent. He's mobile. He will play on the run. He's fearless. He's got a rocket arm, so he's got a little bit of that. He's not as refined as Mahomes, but maybe he will with the right coach. So I could see that being somebody that the Chargers should go after full steam if they do, in fact, fire Len. What do you think?
I can see that being a good hire. I'm trying to remember, too, as a player, I know Bieniemy was with the Broncos for a long time, but didn't he also have a stint with the Chargers?
Did he play for the Chargers? I'm not sure. That would be interesting. That would add an additional wrinkle to it.
Right.
Because I'm just talking about specifically his work with Mahomes, and they are going to need somebody. They struck gold with Justin Herbert. Nobody expected that. Everybody thought he was developmental. I didn't expect it. I thought he had the raw talent, but I thought he could easily flame out and be a bust. And clearly that's not the case. So they need to hire someone who is going to maximize that, because it's rare to get a guy with that kind of ability.
I'm a big fan of Justin Herbert. I picked him up game 3, game 4 this year, and he carried my fantasy team. Kept me still alive in one of the leagues I'll talk about a little bit later. But
okay, awesome. Yeah, I can't wait to hear about that. Very, very unique league. All right, so let's move on. So we talked last week about Will Fuller and Bradley Roby from the Texans, who were suspended 6 games for violating the NFL's substance abuse policy. Well, we have another one. It's not a Texan, but it's another major starter. So starting cornerback A.J. Bouye from the Broncos is facing suspension. So it hasn't come down yet, but he's facing suspension for performance enhancing drugs. If he gets the same penalty as Fuller and Roby, it's going to be it's looking like 6 games, which would be 4 games this season and 2 games next season. And Bouye was, he was a stud with the Jaguars and has been a pretty good, solid number 1 corner for the Broncos. Now the Broncos, they're 4-8. They'd have to win out to have any shot at the playoffs, so it's not likely that they would have made it. But still, you can't have this as a team. These are the kind of misses that a team like the Broncos, who nearly beat the Chiefs this weekend, they can't have these kind of mishaps from their star players. What are your thoughts on that?
I not to excuse the players, but I think I understand to a degree where they're coming from. It's that adage: if you're not cheating, you're not trying. They're going to try. He doesn't have a whole lot to lose, like you said, and honestly, as we see these penalties come down pretty frequently in the NFL, as opposed to Major League Baseball, where if you get something like that, it seems like you're tainted forever. Nobody really cares in the NFL. They come back, you forget all about it. I mean, I couldn't tell you who's been suspended due to performance-enhancing drugs and who hasn't. So,
Josh Gordon is on like his eighth life when it comes to PEDs.
And he's back now. He just got reinstated.
He is. Yeah. He got reinstated. That's what I mean. It's like everybody will keep giving Josh Gordon a chance because of his talent.
I mean, it just doesn't seem to be a big deal. And Josh Gordon, the funny thing is, I think his was probably the most minor. He liked to smoke weed. He just couldn't stop smoking weed ever. And he kept getting popped for, which is kind of the dumbest thing in the world.
Like Ricky Williams back in the day. Like he stopped playing football because he's like, if I can't smoke a doobie, I'm not going to play football.
So like I said, it doesn't shock me. I don't think it's going to have real long-term ramifications. The Broncos are dead. He gets the rest of the season off. Yeah, he loses a paycheck. Like you said, he's a superstar. They're going to keep paying him.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. If this team was more in contention, it would maybe be bigger news. It's still big news. Yeah. It's not that I don't get the edge, and getting any edge you can. Totally get that. It's more, you have to understand that you're part of something bigger. You're part of a team. You have certain responsibilities, whether you agree with it or not. There are certain rules that you have to follow. So I'm always bothered when players know that. We can argue whether the rules are stupid or not. That's an entirely different discussion. The fact that weed is a banned substance, like, come on. But it's still a rule. While it's a rule that you should follow because you could be hurting your team. Yes, the Broncos are out of it right now, but players like this and Will Fuller and Bradley Roby, they have to keep that kind of thing in mind, that whatever they are doing could be jeopardizing the team, not just themselves.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I sit here and I watch football games a lot of times, and being the numbers person that I am, I'll watch, somebody get a sack. Okay. The funny thing is that sack right there, that moment. And, it's when you see teammates kind of arguing over it or getting a half sack, but I mean, they're literally worth millions of dollars, for a single stat. Yeah. So like you said, right. Getting that edge, hey, well, when it's millions of dollars in your pocket, if Bouye, thinks that's going to give him an edge and get him 1 or 2 more interceptions on the year, that's a lot of money.
Yep. No, I definitely.
I don't think the rule's stupid. I'm just saying I understand why the players are willing to take the risk.
Right. Makes sense. Let's move on and talk about a team we talked about a lot last week, and that's the Philadelphia Eagles. So I had my friend Claudia Roman on, who's a diehard Eagles fan, has been his whole life. And we talked about Carson Wentz and his struggles, giving Jalen Hurts a chance. He thinks Doug Peterson's time is up and that Howie Roseman should bring in a new coach. Maybe Roseman's time is done as well. So the Eagles losing to the Packers and finally benched Carson Wentz. So Jalen Hurts came in and he didn't blow people away, but he provided a spark. And they did move the ball better than when Wentz was in there, and they still lost. But the Eagles have since rather quickly went ahead and named Jalen Hurts the starter for their upcoming game against the Saints. What do you think of this move? Do you think it's smart to name him the starter? Do you think it could mess with Wentz's psyche further? What are your thoughts on this?
Yes, I think it could mess with Wentz's psyche further. I think it's a bad move unless you know you're going to move on from Wentz. At that point, hey, it's worth, okay, let's get Jalen Hurts in there. Let's see what he can do. But if you haven't made that decision, and when you look at the salary cap hit that they would take next year in dead money, if they were to release him this offseason, whether release him, trade him, whatever their options may be to get out of his contract, would be a huge salary cap hit. If that's the decision they've made, like, hey, we're done with this guy, we want to move on, then by all means, get Hurts in there. I don't think they're at that point yet. In which case, I don't understand it. Let Wentz get in there. Let him try and get his head straight. You've committed to him for another 2 years. I think it's some 60, or actually another 3 years because they gave him the extension for, almost $100 million. Most of that contract they gave was guaranteed. So, yeah, I mean, they've invested a whole lot into it to give Jalen Hurts this shot yet. I don't think there would be any harm in letting Jalen Hurts sit out, go into training camp next year. Look, if the training camp he looks like the better quarterback, make the move. Then you've got a nice solid backup. But at this point, I don't know. The timing seems a little off to me. You're not Miami, who you knew you were going to bring in to at some point. You're not the Chargers, who knew they were going to bring in Herbert. This seems a little rushed to me. It seems a little off.
Well, here's my thinking of possibly why they did it. Whether we can debate whether we thought it was right or not. So Wentz has been awful, right? And it's not just his decision making, it's his turnovers, it's his accuracy. They actually ended up benching him right after he just missed on 2 bad throws. No, it wasn't because there was pressure and got sacked. No, he was just missing. He was off. Well, you have to see, Jalen Hurts is not a 6th or 7th rounder. He's a 2nd round pick. Whether you should have drafted him as a possible quarterback, once again, that's a separate debate. But I think you need to see what you have. And my opinion, at watching Jalen Hurts as a quarterback in Alabama, and then he transferred to Oklahoma, I don't think he's going to be a franchise quarterback. But you have to at least see. You invested a 2nd round pick in him. You're not getting anything out of Wentz. Anything that you would normally get as an edge by continuing to start a veteran versus a rookie, he's not giving you that. It's not like he's giving you stable leadership and the team is rallying around him. Oh, they keep losing. And a lot of it is on him. Yes, the offensive line has been a disaster. I think they are last in the league in sacks allowed. So I get that. But it's still, Wentz is also just flat out missing throws and making bad decisions. So why not give Hurts a shot? See what, maybe you have lightning in a bottle. Most likely not, but you won't know until you try. And here's why. Because it's easier to see in game action than in the off season. And if you wait until the off season and let's say you pass on the opportunity to draft another actual franchise quarterback, you don't know what the next year is going to bring, and it could just be disaster going forward. So I actually like the move to give Hurts at least a couple starts, maybe not the rest of the season. You don't have to. Maybe all Wentz needs, and this was actually Claudie's suggestion, was all Wentz needs is some time on the bench to get his head straight. Like, hey, you've been benched. You better fix it, figure it out, take a couple days, take a couple games, just back off, see the field from the outside, and maybe you'll get fixed. But also see what you have in Hurts. And if he's not the guy, which I don't think he will be, but if he's not the guy, now you know, okay, we either need to commit to Wentz or at least draft a quarterback to bring in competition. But we need to know if we're going to spend because it's now looking like they could get a high draft pick because they continue to lose. So they need to start thinking about the draft cap.
I don't think the Eagles draft a quarterback regardless. And I think if anything else, they should learn their lesson from this. And that's, look, their offensive line is garbage. Like you said, they've given up the most sacks in the league. Do you want to put another rookie quarterback behind there? Do you want another Joe Burrow situation?
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, I think if you get to that point where you decide, hey, neither Wentz is your guy or Hurts is your guy, you're in a complete rebuild mode. And at that point, I've always been a proponent of you start with the lines and you build from there. I mean, you don't get a rookie quarterback and throw them behind a garbage line. Draft a line for a couple of years. They're going to be veterans, and now you got a real good line in front of your young quarterback. But
and that's how Philly did it originally. That's how they won that Super Bowl. Is they were deep on the offensive line and the defensive line. That's how Howie Roseman built his team. Joe Douglas, when he was there before he went to New York, they start with the hog mollies up front. And then they won a Super Bowl with Nick freaking Foles.
Right.
So.
Well, and to me, the thing that made the most sense when I heard that they were going with Jalen Hurts was maybe they don't want to get him hurt. I disagree with your guest last week in that, I think they could trade him. I think a team would be open to it. Quarterback is a dire need, and he passes the eye test. If you watch him play when he's good, he's good. And so I think a lot of coaches will go, hey, I can make magic out of that. Now, whether they can or not.
He was an MVP candidate his rookie year before he got injured.
Absolutely, yeah. And then Nick Foles came in. But I think somebody would be willing to take a chance. I don't know that you're going to get a real high draft pick for him, but I think a team would give you a 3rd or 4th round draft pick to pick up that contract. You're going to have to eat some of it. There's going to be a dead cap hit regardless. But again, I don't think the Carson Wentz is unmovable or wouldn't be a valuable asset for some team.
So do you think that's a better move for the Eagles to go ahead and look to trade him, or to just draft somebody to bring in as competition to maybe light a fire? Of course, that didn't work when they drafted Hurts and Wentz got worse. But what do you think is the better move for the Eagles organization?
I mean, at this point, I think if you draft another quarterback in the early rounds, then you're a little bit of a laughing stock. I mean, then why did you draft Jalen Hurts last year if you really don't think he can play? You invested money in Carson Wentz. You're kind of proving that you can evaluate quarterbacks very well. Like I said, you need to get your line in order before you go and get a quarterback.
And that's normally the conventional wisdom. But then look what Arizona did. They drafted a quarterback.
Well, they drafted
a
quarterback that could run behind any line. And I think maybe that's part of Philadelphia's thinking too. Is, hey, our line is so bad, let's get somebody mobile back there.
Right. Well, we will certainly see how that ends up. Sucks for Jalen that he's playing one of the best defenses in the
Right.
NFL. And the Saints defense, after starting off really, really badly, has really come on lately. They are playing better pass coverage, getting a lot of pressure on the quarterback. They only sacked the Falcons three times this game, but when they played a couple weeks ago, they had, I believe, 8 sacks. So you're going to put him up against a rookie second-round quarterback who, by all observation, needs a lot of development. Good luck. At least he can scramble. Maybe he can scramble away and make some magic. So let's go ahead and move on to what is always the most depressing news section to talk about, but something that we have to always talk about in 2020, and that is the latest COVID updates. Yay! So we haven't had a ton of players on the list this week, but the ones we do have are all on the same team, which is unfortunately how it seems to be going, with all these little outbreaks. And it was coming off a bye. So the Carolina Panthers, actually coming off of a bye, placed 8 of their players on the COVID reserve list. 3 of those players tested positive and 5 were just close contacts. One of the positives is wide receiver DJ Moore, who is one of their starters, very, very strong wide receiver. And the other wide receiver, Curtis Samuel, was considered a close contact, so he's on the reserve list. Now, what the reserve list means, as a refresher, is if you're a close contact, it just means you have to test negative 5 days in a row. It's like quarantining. You've been in the proximity of the person who tested positive. You need 5 consecutive negative tests, and then you can qualify to play. So the fact that today's Tuesday, this news came out yesterday, all 5 players that are on the reserve list can qualify to play, but they're going to miss practice all week. Now, that hasn't bothered other teams. The Titans earlier in the year, their whole team was out, and they came back and beat the Bills. So some teams have been able to come back without practicing, but the Panthers are still a young team. They need all the practice they can get. They are playing Denver, so not the biggest opponent. We mentioned AJ Boye isn't going to be there. How do you think this is going to affect the Panthers' chances against Denver, if at all?
Oh, I don't know. I know I'd take the under based on all these conditions. Yeah, I don't know. There's a recent update that Des Bryant got pulled out of the game today for the Ravens right before the Cowboys, or right before they took the field due to COVID. And then I don't know if you heard, he tweeted right afterwards, says that he's done with the year. He can't take this anymore. So we'll see how that goes.
So the Des Bryant Baltimore experience is over.
Yeah. Or so tomorrow he may change his mind. Now whether Baltimore does is a different story, but
And we are recording this at 6:42 Pacific time on Tuesday. So yeah, there is a football game going on right now. The game that was originally supposed to be last Thursday, the Dallas Cowboys at the Baltimore Ravens. So we'll probably talk about that on the pod next week. But yeah, still, as this season has been, we get football. It's a Tuesday night.
Yeah.
Last week we had it on Wednesday. Why not? Football every day of the week. Welcome to 2020. That's honestly one of the only good things about this year is football nearly every day of the week. I can't complain about that. Here's some good COVID news. 47.7%. So closing in on 50% drop. So they have these testing periods, basically 1 week, where they'll gather all the testing data up, where they test the players, they test the staff for all the teams in the NFL. Nearly 50% drop from the previous testing period the week before in positive tests. Now, that's probably due to the fact that as of last week, all 32 teams are now on the intensive protocols. So there's different levels of protocols, just like the state of California has different levels of they have red tier, purple tier, and there's different restrictions. It's kind of like that, but for the different teams. But they all move to intensive, which is the most strict social distance, all sorts of protocols in place. And you saw a nearly 50% drop. And the only real COVID updates we had were the Panthers. So that seems to be a positive step in the right direction. Look, the NFL has been trying to figure this out all year. It's been a lot of trial and error. You had the Titans outbreak earlier in the year. You had the Ravens outbreak last week. Lamar Jackson is playing tonight. I saw earlier that he did get reinstated. But it seems they're getting it together and just in time, because I think the last thing any of us want is for this to affect the playoffs. This is the lowest positive rate for any testing period since the end of October. So it seems like even due to all the surge, the fact that those numbers are dropping is a good sign. Agreed?
Yeah, absolutely agree. Do you think they go into a bubble for the playoffs?
There've been talk about it. I think that's smart. I think what the NBA did was could be a good blueprint to work off of. And if you really want to make sure that there's not a Ravens situation, because it's not like these games wouldn't get played, right? There's 53 active people on the roster. You've got practice squad. You can always fill them in. But who's going to want Trace McSorley in a playoff game if Lamar gets positive or whatever? Obviously, he already had it. But but that's the scenario. Like, nobody wants to see replacement players. So you need to take whatever precautions you can to ensure that not only are the games played, but they're played with the teams at full strength in order to get a good product on the field.
I agree with that 100%. I also agree with, I heard you guys talking about it a little bit last week, but I agree with the Steelers being angry that game kept getting moved around. Why are you willing to let my 49ers go out there with a practice squad, let the Broncos go out there with no quarterback at all? But the the Ravens, you want to keep pushing things around forward. Steelers like, look, we're ready to play. I think at some point, you forfeit. You don't have the players that can go out. You either play with what you got or you forfeit. And I don't think, like you said, I don't think you want to see that in the playoffs. So, I think a bubble situation would be smart. I think that it worked really well for the NBA. It worked really well for the NHL.
And doing that for all 32 teams might be a challenge. But for playoffs, when you're just talking about 14, I think it can be done. I know the NFL's talking about it. I hope that they implement something because I need me some playoff football.
Right. It's 14 and it goes down to 8 after the first week. It's not this real long drawn out thing like the NBA.
It's not a series.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. 1 week and then right, nearly half the teams are gone. So one other thing I want to talk about is you're a 49ers fan.
Yeah.
You went to the Super Bowl last year, riding high. Kyle Shanahan, one of the best coaches in the NFL, and there's still a chance, but the chance is pretty slim that you're going to make the playoffs. So I wanted to get your thoughts. We heard a lot from Claudia last week on the Eagles. What are your thoughts on the state of 49ers football this year, next year? Tell me where you think you see the Niners going.
I mean, obviously, I'm a 49er fan. I love our team. I had high hopes going into last night. Last night was kind of a do or die for us in terms of keeping any playoff hope, I thought. Last night, I know not everybody's watching the game at the same time, but last night being the Niners versus the Bills game. And as we get more and more pieces back of our offense, man, I'm excited about our offense. Between Ayuk and Debo and Mostert, who we had back last night, and Kittle back and Jimmy G. And I don't know if Jimmy G is the long-term answer. I'm not as down on him as a lot of people are. Now, I did think that there was one interesting stat they showed during the game last night, which I think it was something like, during Shanahan's tenure, he's 0-24 when he's down by 7 points or more, either entering or in the fourth quarter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's just, and I think some of it, and I love Shanahan's play calling. I think he's a genius with his play calling. But it does
one of the best.
Yeah, but I mean, when watching last night's game, it was great for a while. It sucked that we were down so much, and it's what drove it. But it was great to see some energy behind the offense, to see them actually out there throwing it, to get these wide receivers. And I understood when our number one wide receiver was Kendrick Bourne, that you're wanting to run the ball every down, because that's not who you want as your number one wide receiver. But as we get more weapons back, and at this point in the season, I don't think it'd be smart to bring Kittle back, regardless of how his foot may be for the last week or two.
Right, yeah, let him heal up. There's zero reason to bring him back.
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of feel the same way about Jimmy G. And like I said, I don't know what to think about Jimmy G. I'll always advocate for the fact that in his one full healthy year, he took us to the Super Bowl. Prior to that, he joined a team that was, I want to say we were 0-9 or 0-10, and he came in and won 5 of 6. Won 5 in a row at the end of the year. So, Mullen is a backup, and that's what he is. He's not a good quarterback. He's not a horrible backup. He's a horrible quarterback, but he's somebody you bring in and gives you a chance to hang in there for a game. Jimmy G wins some of these games, and a lot of people write off that last year when the Niners were real beat up as well, when Emmanuel Sanders was out right after we traded for him, and our offensive line was beat up, and Kittle was out for a while, and Jimmy G really carried that team. Him and that's kind of when Deebo Samuel made his breakout. So I'm not ready to write off Jimmy G, but on the other hand, look, if I'm being honest, if I'm looking at the quarterbacks of the NFC West, he's at best the third best quarterback. And I don't think that's a spot that you ever want to be, in a division. Now, I think the NFC West is a real strong division, but he's not Russell Wilson. I love Kyler Murray. I know he hasn't played real well in the last few weeks, and I think there's something wrong with his shoulder. But Jared Goff, like I said, at best, I think Jimmy's probably the third best quarterback. So, is there room for improvement? Absolutely. So I'm a little torn there. I wouldn't be opposed to them bringing in somebody to compete with him. I mentioned Sam Darnold earlier. If you can bring him in on a few $1 million, something like the Saints have done where they brought in Jameis Winston. I wouldn't want Jameis Winston, but,
right. But that's the idea.
Yeah. Bring in a good backup, bring in somebody who maybe you say, his contract isn't untenable at this point. I think if they wanted to, and I don't see them doing it, I think they could release him after this year for, $3 or $4 million hit. So, We're not tied to Jimmy G by any means, but I don't see a better option out there. And I think he gets a little bit of a bum rap because he's been a game manager. But again, I think that when he's needed to, at least there were points last year, he carried the team. And, you look at Brady early in his career, they called him a game manager, and you do what you can, you do what's needed. Hey, you run the ball sometimes, you pass the ball sometimes. And, if there's no need to pass the ball, why take that risk? But
let's not forget that Trent Dilfer won a Super Bowl.
and Brad Johnson. And, look, you can win with good quarterbacks and a great surrounding cast. Not that often, but it happens.
Well, here's a scenario for you. So the 49ers are currently 5-7. If the season were to end today, they would have the 14th draft pick. But they are only 2 games out of a top 5 pick. So let's say, worst case scenario, Nick Mullins implodes and the Niners just end up losing out. It's still within the realm of possibility to have a top 5 pick. So let's say the Niners are sitting in the top 5. Do you still think that bringing in a free agent quarterback to compete with Jimmy G is the way to go? But there's some super talent. Granted, I don't think you'll get one of the top 2, but Trey Lance out of North Dakota State, tons of physical potential there. What would you want the Niners to do?
Mac Jones, is that his name too? I know that,
from Alabama. Yeah.
I see a lot of Niner fans calling for him. Would like to see him. Again, that's why I'm not a GM. They get to spend all their time. They get to spend all their time.
Well, you get to play GM. You're on the GM
that's
seat.
Right.
What would you do?
Right. That's what I do in Madden. Again, all else being, if I have the opportunity, I might go for a Darnold, bring in Darnold, have Jimmy G, use that first round pick on, like I said before, I'm all about linemen. Let's build our offensive line. Hell, we've used our first round pick on a defensive lineman, I think, for the last 5-6 years. And that's, the defensive line is kind of what carried us to the Super Bowl. We definitely could use some help in the secondary. So, no, I don't necessarily think that, hey, if we're in the top 5 and, there's a real good QB prospect there that we should jump on it.
Here's what I see. There's still a lot of talent. You've had a lot of injuries this year. Obviously, Nick Bosa, George Kittle. And this team went to the Super Bowl a year ago and didn't really lose a ton.
So
you've got the talent.
We've lost every one of our starters this year at every position at some point during the year.
You've got the talent. You've got playmakers now, young playmakers, Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. Obviously, Kittle, when he's healthy, is one of the best tight ends easily in the NFL. Your line is serviceable. It's not. There's many worse lines. The defensive line, when they're all healthy, is one of the best, if not the best, defensive lines in the NFL. Your secondary probably could use you a little bit of an upgrade with Sherman. Getting up there in age, doesn't have the same speed. Still got elite coverage skills, but he's a little limited. But you're not going to draft a cornerback at number 5. So
why not?
I don't think there's a top 5 talent.
Maybe not this year.
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm not saying you never do. I'm saying this draft, I don't think there's a top 5. There is some good offensive line talent, some good tackles, another deep wide receiver class, but you've got some young talent. And George Kittle, for all intents and purposes, is a wide receiver. He's great after the catch. So the big weakness I still see there is at quarterback. Now, Jimmy G is by far from the worst quarterback in the NFL, and he is a game manager, and he has been known to win some games, but he's not going to win games by himself. So when you get in these scenarios where you do lose some injuries, and injuries are bound to happen, you do get in these tight games. I think of that missed deep ball in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs, and that could be the answer. It's 2 yards, but Russell Wilson hits that. Russell Wilson does not miss that deep ball in the Super Bowl. I guarantee you.
No, and it comes out of the stat that I was talking. where they've never come back for more than 7+ points in the fourth quarter. And you're right, that's not what's in his repertoire.
So I will take you off of the GM seat. I don't want to put you on that. It's a big seat to fill. And John Lynch has done a great job as GM of the Niners. And that's stuff for him to figure out. I just wanted to get your thoughts as a Niners fan on what direction you think they should go. But honestly, a lot of it is injury related. You've got one of the best coaches in the NFL. You've got a ton of talent, especially on the defensive line. Maybe you just need to get healthy. Maybe give Jimmy G another year. Maybe bring in a free agent quarterback or veteran who's on the outs like a Sam Darnold to come in and at least compete.
If they do want to draft a rookie and sit him behind Jimmy for a little bit, like Jimmy certainly hasn't proven that he's going to stay healthy for a full year.
That's true.
Not a bad route to go. And you're right. We're deep at most other positions, so there's not a real glaring need. Like I said, I wouldn't be opposed to it. I'm just not really ready to give up on Jimmy yet. I don't think his contract is one. You look at it, you're like, he's making $20-25 million a year. It seems like that. But by NFL quarterback standards, it's not. He's making about what he should be making. If I'm ranking all the quarterbacks in the league, he probably falls, closer to 10 to 15,
15 to 20.
closer to 15.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm a Niner fan. He's going to get a little bump there.
You're gonna get biased. That's fine.
But at his salary, it's not outrageous for where he's at.
Right. Well, I'm eager to see what the Niners do. I live in Santa Clara County now. I was expecting to go to some Niners games this year, and COVID was like, nope. I was actually going to watch the Dolphins. The Dolphins played the Niners. I was going to go to that game. I was going to go to the Dolphins-Raiders game, which is at the new Raiders, in Las Vegas. But they're not allowing fans. I could have seen my Dolphins even moving to the West Coast, but nope.
Well, the Niners are out here. I say out here. Texas is a big state, so it's still 3-hour drive. But they're out here to play Dallas in 2 weeks, and I looked at tickets, but I'm not going to go in this. So
yeah, it's
the only thing I like about the Cowboys though is that stadium. That stadium is phenomenal.
AT&T Stadium is gorgeous. Yeah, I would love to see that in person. Let's transition to talking about the playoffs. So we actually had two teams clinch playoff spots for the first time this week. The Saints in the NFC and the Chiefs in the AFC, with their wins and other teams' respective losses, are now guaranteed to at least make the playoffs. So let's take a look now at the actual playoff picture. We're just going to go through the seeds in each conference. And we'll at least talk about, we're getting close to the end of the season. We'll talk about some of the teams on the bubble and if they have a shot to get in. So let's start with the NFC, since you're a Niners fan. So the current number one seed is the team that locked up that playoff spot. That is the Saints. Behind them, the Packers at 9-3. So Packers actually haven't locked up a playoff spot yet, but I think that's a foregone conclusion. So the Packers number two in the number two seed. The Rams, after beating Arizona, are 8-4 now, and then the number three seed, and they're the first place in the NFC West. The Giants, who are still 5-7. I mean, that division is, unless they win out, best case scenario, you've got an 8-8 winner from the NFC East. But the Giants just knocked off the Seahawks. They're playing really strong. That defense, Joe Judge is bringing the Patriot way, and you're starting to see that defense really come together. They completely shut down Russell Wilson. They sacked him 5 times. He only had 1 touchdown. He had like 62% completion percentage, which for Russell Wilson is very low. So don't sleep on the Giants at the number 4 seed right now. Seahawks are still in the playoff hunt in the number 5 seed. They're still 8-4. They have not had the same success they did earlier in the year. It's funny. The Seahawks defense has played better. That was the big weakness at the beginning, right? It was like you could just pass all over. They had the worst secondary, but the defense has played better, but the offense has kind of stalled a little bit. So if they can find both of those things clicking at the same time, Seahawks could definitely still make some noise in the playoffs. Number 6 seed in the NFC is the Bucks. They were on bye this week at 7-5. And number 7 seed, the Minnesota Vikings, if this season were to end right now. So the Vikings had to get to overtime to beat the Jags, but they got the win. They started off the season, I believe it was 0-4. They're now 6-6, so they are definitely on their way up. Let's talk about the first, let's say, just one bubble team, because the 3 teams that are on the bubble, Arizona Cardinals, who are technically on the outlooking end, they were in first in the NFC West like 2 weeks ago, and now they're 6-6. So they are in the 8 seed. So they are competing with the Vikings for that 7 seed right now. That's probably the team they would need to get ahead of. I don't see them necessarily climbing above the Bucks. And the 2 teams after that are the Bears and the Lions.
Yeah, I don't see either of them making a run. The only other teams that I see with legitimate chance of making the playoffs would be out of the NFC least, be the Redskins, who actually that would be my pick out of the NFC East right now, or the Eagles. Yeah,
especially coming off that victory over Pittsburgh, which, listeners, let it be noted that I predicted. I called the Washington football team to beat the Steelers in my picks last week, and Claudia called it a bold pick. It was a bold pick, but I just felt, I watched that Thanksgiving game closely where they dismantled the Cowboys. Alex Smith he may not be a superstar, but he's always been a very efficient quarterback. He knows how to run a team. You disagree?
Always goes back a long time. I like Alex Smith now.
Okay.
Or not to root.
Always. Okay, maybe not
years
always.
On the Niners where I despised everything about Alex Smith.
But that was where he was drafted, so he was a rookie. He had a lot of, once he came into his own, I mean, with his time with the Chiefs, the reason that Mahomes didn't start right away as a rookie is because Alex Smith was having a career season that year before he got injured. So yeah, Alex Smith, especially this time in his life, 36 years old, and what a story, coming off 17 surgeries, nearly dying. But he's leading that team in the right direction. Rivera, they're finally buying into his team message, and that team is playing with some swag, and they've got a good defense. It's going to be interesting to see who out of those two teams, the Giants and the Washington football team, takes that division. They're both 5-7. They're both on the up at the right time. You're right. That's really the other thing. The Cardinals are in it. I don't think the Bears or the Lions, honestly, either have a chance at 5-7. But let's see how that NFC East finishes.
And
let's jump over.
I predicted about week 4 that I thought the Eagles would win it at 6-9-1 with my buddy, the Eagles fan. So we'll see. It's not looking so good now, but that was my early prediction.
No, it's not. They would have to win 3 out of their last 4,
right.
And they're about to start Jalen Hurts against the New Orleans Saints, so not going to be off to a good start. I think it's interesting that the Eagles and the Cowboys are the 2 worst teams in the NFC. Period, not just the East. Period. So let's jump over to the AFC. So the current 1 seed is actually still the Steelers. So as of this moment, they're both at 11-1. The Steelers technically have the tiebreaker, probably due to strength of schedule, over the Chiefs. So the Chiefs, though, did lock up their playoff spot. So they're technically the number 2 seed, but they have locked a playoff berth. Number 3 seed, the Bills, who are also peaking at the right time. They're at 9-3, and you alluded to the game where I thought they handled San Francisco pretty well. You had this at the beginning of the season. Josh Allen was playing so well. He had a lull, he had some downs, and then he seems to be peaking again, which is the right time when you want to do that. The Titans, even though they lost to the Browns, which I know you watched that game closely, what a game that ended up being, are still in first technically in the AFC South. The Colts won. They're both 8-4, but the Titans currently own the tiebreaker. The Browns, 9-3 Browns. Can you say that with a straight face? The 9-3 Browns. That's just, it doesn't sound right.
Still not a believer.
Well, they did it against the Titans, and no one can say that the Titans are a bad team. You know, they went to the AFC Championship game last year. They're 8-4. They're currently in first in the AFC South. They are a good team. They may not be elite. They may not be on the level of the Chiefs or even the Steelers, but they're a good football team. And that was the big knock so far on Cleveland this season, is they hadn't beaten a good football team. Well, they just did. Whether they can keep that going, we'll find out. But at this moment, 9-3, sitting in the 5 spot. Number 6 seed currently, my Miami Dolphins, 8-4. What a job Brian Flores has done. I've talked about it before on this podcast. We do have a rough stretch coming up. We've kind of got through all of our easy games by beating the Jets last week and the Bengals this week. We have the Chiefs next, and then we end the season. We have to play the Raiders, the Patriots, and the Bills. So all teams that are either in the playoffs or right on this bubble, and then the Patriots. The Patriots may not be in the playoff hunt necessarily, but they're the Patriots. They just won 45-0 over the Chargers. So interested to see if we can squeak out one more win. We should at least be able to get into the 7th spot, which is miraculous considering that we still don't have a ton of talent. And I think that's a testament to Brian Flores and the job he's done. Any comments on the Dolphins? I'd love to hear your take.
On the Dolphins specifically. No, I really like what the Dolphins have done. I mean, I thought, even watching last year when they had almost zero talent on the team, Brian Flores has done a hell of a job coaching that team. I love their pick of Tua. It hasn't we haven't seen the full results of it yet, but out of all the quarterbacks drafted last year, he was my favorite one. So yeah, I mean, I really like everything that Miami's done with that team. I don't know that I don't know how confident I am that they're going to make the playoffs this year, but we'll see.
Well, let's talk about the teams that were behind them, because I think that is definitely going to come into play. So the Colts are right there at number 7 seed, but the same record, 8-4. So the Colts and the Titans are still fighting for first in the AFC South. On the bubble, the Raiders, who got clobbered by the Falcons 2 weeks ago, and then needed a crazy zero blitz call by Greg Williams that ended up getting him fired to beat the Jets this week. I'm not saying the Raiders aren't a good team. They beat the Chiefs. They're the only team to beat the defending Super Bowl champions. They have had some games where they just played lights out, but they clearly have some weaknesses. They're at 7-5. The Dolphins do play the Raiders in week 16. As I mentioned earlier, that was the game I was going to go to if they were actually allowing fans in Las Vegas. So that will be a pivotal game in the playoff race. The Ravens are currently the 9th seed. So they have been going on a slide. They've got Lamar back. We're obviously podcasting, so I don't know exactly what's going on in the game right now, but I'd like to think they'll handle the Cowboys and move to 7-5.
It is 24-10 with 4 minutes and 40 seconds left in the third quarter.
Baltimore?
Yeah.
So that was my pick. That'll make me 12-3 for the week. We'll talk about game picks here in a second. Patriots are right behind them at 10. They're really the only other team that, God, that's crazy that the Patriots still have a chance.
And,
disgusts me.
and
It
they're
disgusts
the
me.
ones that would scare me. I mean, again,
Yes.
we talked about the rookie quarterback. You put Tua up against the Patriots later. I'm liking the Patriots in that game.
Yeah.
I'm just not willing to. We got too many years we've watched Belichick. I'm not willing to rule him out yet. I mean, one thing about Belichick teams, one thing about the not the Raiders, the Steelers under Mike Tomlin. Every year consistently they get better at the end of the season to the beginning of the season. And to me, that's just the hallmark of a good coach. I mean, that's the difference in your really good coaching staffs and those who aren't. And so, yeah, I mean, I've watched for too many years the Patriots managed to peak at the right time. And, seeing that 45-0 beatdown of the Chargers, looks like they're starting to peak at the right time.
Yeah, as a Dolphins fan, I've been watching that for 2 decades now. So trust me, that's worries me more than anything on there is the fact that they keep winning and that they're now starting to win big. So we will keep an eye on them. All the other teams, while not technically eliminated, would need a lot of miracles to make it. So that is the current playoff standings. You ready to jump into some fantasy talk?
Sure.
I'm always ready to jump into some fantasy talk, and I'm especially excited this week. We got to make our picks. Here I am jumping the gun. I'm like ready to hear about your unique league, and we got to make some picks for next week. So let's go through the week 14 previews. We'll make our game picks, and then we will jump in, and you have a very special thing to share with regards to fantasy football. So starting on Thursday, we've got the Patriots, we just mentioned, at the Rams. This game is, I think, a tough game to pick. This is actually the first time these two teams have played since their Super Bowl matchup a couple years ago, where the Patriots won 13-3 against McVay's Rams. I have a feeling that the Rams are going to pull it off here. I know the Patriots are playing well. The Rams just have more talent. And as good as Belichick is at coaching, there's just so many pieces they're missing. They're not going to get these special teams touchdowns every week that they got against the Chargers. They're not going to go up against a rookie quarterback. Goff's not a superstar, but he's efficient. I'm picking the Rams in this. What about you?
Like we were just talking about, I'm going to go with the Patriots here. I just, they tend to peak at the right time. I'm probably a little biased against the Rams, not because I dislike them, but because I've watched the Niners beat them twice. And they haven't been a very good team. I think that, their strength is in their wide receivers. They're having a hard time running the ball. They got to run by committee. And Belichick, with the aid of his defensive backs, Gilmore in specific, will figure out a way to shut down the Rams and he'll just out game plan McVay.
I can certainly see that happening. It's one of the reasons I was having trouble picking this game. Maybe it's wishful thinking that I picked the Rams, but I am going to go with LA. So on to the Sunday morning games. Chiefs at Dolphins. I'm not even going to pretend to pick Miami. And it's not just against the Dolphins. I won't pick anyone against KC. I just won't. I don't care. They will find a way to win. It doesn't even matter if you play them close. The Raiders beat them once, but the Raiders played them close in the second game. Mahomes still found a way to win. The Broncos just played them close at the end. Mahomes found a way to win. So
what I'm waiting to see a team do is beat up Mahomes, because I still haven't seen that. Really beat him up.
You can't.
Well, that's a credit to his offensive line. Look, he's mobile, but he's not that mobile.
He's elusive, and I think that's the big difference. Like Peyton Manning was always elusive. Nobody would ever call him mobile,
right.
But he just had a way of shifting. Brady at his prime, he's not as good now, but Brady in his prime is just so good at moving in the pocket.
Rodgers.
Mahomes has that, but he also has that role. Yeah, Rodgers, absolutely. He's a little more like Rodgers than I would say Peyton and Brady, in that he, in addition to be able to move in the pocket, is as soon as he gets out of that pocket, he's insanely dangerous. So he's just got this feel for when he can slide out of the pocket. And then once he's out there, forget it. He just waits for his playmakers to get open, sends a no-look sidearm, whatever, right in the arms of Kelsey or Tyreek Hill. I just haven't seen anyone be able to stop that yet. So I think the Dolphins have one of the best defenses in the NFL. I'm not saying that as a homer. I'm saying it because of results. They have an interception, I think it's something like 20 straight games. They lead the NFL in turnovers, consecutive turnovers, dating back to last season. They've actually got a really good pass rush now. They just came off 6 sacks against the Bengals. The Bengals have a bad offensive line, but that's a good defense. Still, I don't care. There's no way in hell I'm picking against Kansas City. I'm assuming you're with me there.
Yeah, I'll take Kansas City.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on. The Dallas Cowboys at those Cincinnati Bengals that I just referenced. If Joe Burrow was still there, I would pick Cincy. I just feel like he'd be coming into his prime. He played great all season and only was getting better as the season went on. But Brandon Allen, Joe Mixon has been out. They just don't. Yeah. Versus Andy Dalton. Oh, there you go. Andy Dalton revenge game. Oh, forget it. I picked Dallas before I even realized that. I love me some narratives. I'm going to pick Dallas even more firmly against Cincinnati.
Man, that's tough. I look. The only two things I root for generally every week are a Niner win and a Dallas loss. But yeah, I probably got to go with Dallas here.
All right. Tennessee at Jacksonville. So that is a division game, and Jacksonville's been playing people surprisingly close. They keep losing, but they're not getting blown out. So they're feisty. Mike Glennon has shown a little bit of a spark. So I don't think this game will necessarily be a blowout. That being said, I do think Tennessee bounces back after that tough loss to Cleveland, and I think they handle their business and run all over. And Derrick Henry runs all over the Jacksonville defense. I'm picking the Titans.
I agree 100%. I think Derrick Henry is going to have a big game. Yeah, I think Tennessee is going to be able to prove a point after their game against Cleveland last week.
So this next pick is one we might disagree on because it's not necessarily straightforward. So we have the Houston Texans at the Chicago Bears. Conventional thinking would pick the Texans here. Deshaun Watson is one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. Yeah, he's missing a lot of pieces. Obviously, he lost Fuller. DeAndre Hopkins got traded before the year. Bradley Roby, the number 1 cornerback, is out. But still, with that being said, the Texans had a chance to beat the Colts, and then there was a fumbled snap at the end of the game. They were at the 2-yard line, or else they could have pulled that off. And the Bears have lost 6 straight, 7 straight, something like that. I think we're 5-1, and now they're 5-6 or 5-7. But I just have a feeling that this is the game that Chicago gets right. Houston does not have a good defense. They've got one of the worst rush defenses in the league, and they can't cover the pass. And that was before they lost their number 1 defensive back. Trubisky, for all his faults, and he has a lot of faults, he's playing hard. He's making some plays. I think they'll make enough plays. I think this defense, who has not played well the last 2 weeks against Detroit and Green Bay before that, I think they get things together. They play tough against Houston, and I'm picking the Bears here.
Yeah, no, I'm going to go with Houston here. Just a far better quarterback. You mentioned Houston doesn't have the greatest defense. Their quarterbacks are not that great, but you don't have to be when you're playing Trubisky.
This is true, and it's hard to bet against Deshaun Watson in any scenario. So definitely don't fault your pick there. Arizona Cardinals at the New York Giants. I'm going to ride the Giants train here. I am. They're playing very well as a team, and it's not just is Daniel Jones going to be back? Danny Dimes? No, they won with Colt McCoy against the Seahawks in Seattle. So this defense is playing well. Wayne Gallman has played really well at running back for the Giants. I think that's going to keep going. Arizona is a little bit of a mess. Kyler Murray, they're not protecting him very well. He's running for his life, and I think this Giants defense gets the best of him. I'm going to pick New York.
Yeah, again, I'm going to go with the Cardinals here. It's hard for me to pick the NFC East against the NFC West.
I get it.
I was brokenhearted when the Eagles beat the Niners earlier this year, but I'm going to go with the Cardinals over the Giants. Hopefully Kyler Murray's feeling a little better, his shoulder's feeling a little bit better, but I just think that they're the better team than the Giants.
I think they have more talent. I just think the Giants are playing better as a team, and they're better coached right now. Yeah, surprisingly,
Judge is getting everything he can out of those players. And
yeah, exactly. I mean, it reminds me of what Flores did last year with the Dolphins at the end of the season. Is they start peaking at the right time, they start playing together as a team, and that tends to win out against these teams that are just not playing as cohesively.
But the biggest shock for me on the New York Giants, I had no idea Daniel Jones could run like that.
Yeah, he's fast. Yeah. Like legit fast, not just quarterback fast. He does trip himself from time to time on long touchdown runs, but he is a fast quarterback. But like I said, either way, even if Danny Dimes isn't back for this game, Colt McCoy did a good job managing that game and ended up beating the Seahawks. On to Denver at Carolina. We mentioned earlier that the Panthers have a number of players who are out on the COVID list, but the majority of those will be back, assuming they test negative for the rest of the week. I'm actually picking Carolina in this. The Carolina defense has had its problems, but it actually does get a pass rush from time to time. Brian Burns, Florida State alum, shout out to my Seminoles, has definitely had some games where he made some plays. And the thing with Denver is Locke is prone to turnovers. So all you need to do is get some pressure, get him to get some turnovers. These are two teams who are pretty equal and that they're not that good. But once again, I think Carolina I trust their offense a little more. CMC should be back. Christian McCaffrey should be back this week. Teddy Bridgewater runs that offense well. Even without DJ Moore, if they get Curtis Samuel back, they still have Robbie Anderson. I'm picking the Panthers.
Yeah, this was a little bit of a toss-up for me. Honestly, I was leaning toward the Broncos, so you reminded me that McCaffrey's going to come back. And I think that probably tilts me toward Carolina. I like the matchup. I actually like Denver's D. Carolina's D is not that impressive. Their coach is an offensive-minded coach. So, I mean, I think they're a good matchup for each other. I expect it to be a close game. And, yeah, I think getting McCaffrey back is probably going to tilt me toward Carolina, where I was otherwise going to go with the Broncos.
Yeah, I can see this being like a field goal game. I think it's going to be close, low scoring. I don't see these teams really blowing up the scoreboard. I just have a little bit more faith in the superstar of CMC, as you mentioned. Here's an interesting game: the Minnesota Vikings at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Minnesota obviously is on a hot streak. They've won 4 of their last 6, I believe. They are now, as we mentioned, technically in the playoffs, as are the Bucs. The Bucs are right ahead of them. So I think this could be a good game. This could be one of those sneaky, like, best games of the week type games, going back and forth. Kirk Cousins playing very efficiently. Dalvin Cook, one of the best running backs in the NFL. He's cooled down a little lately, mainly because they're giving him the ball 35 times a game. But he's still got the talent. Another Florida State alum. Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson is a revelation. I mean, you just get rid of Stephon Diggs and you just replace him like it's no big deal. That offense is scary, and the defense is playing a little better. That being said, I think Brady wins this. I think it will be a good game. I would bet on Brady over Cousins in this scenario, especially at home. I'm going to pick the Bucs for this one.
I'm going to take Tampa here too, although I agree. I think it has the potential to be a great game. I think Brady coming off a bye week, I think they'll be well rested, well prepared. The only thing that I worry about with that team, and I don't know that it's been called out here at least yet, is they've kind of gone into meltdown mode ever since they decided to sign Antonio Brown. You think that's going to be an additional weapon? It opens things up. His numbers have been okay, but they haven't won since they signed Antonio Brown. So I'm wondering what, if that may be having an effect on the chemistry somewhere down the line. I think I heard he's living in Brady's house, which just strikes me as weird.
That's not good.
No,
I didn't know that.
I mean, that
that's
house
horrible.
is probably huge. It's probably a guest house somewhere on the.
It doesn't matter. It's his bad juju, right?
Yeah.
Antonio Brown, bad juju is a reference to Juju Smith, but I don't know. I did not know that. If that's the case, yeah, that's going to affect Brady. Brady is so like zen and clean and TB12 and all that stuff, and he's bringing in like one of the most chaotic players in the NFL.
Right.
Just ask Mike Tomlin and John Gruden what Antonio Brown can do to the chemistry of a team. That's a very good observation. I'm still going to stick to Tampa Bay, but now I'm a little less sure of my pick here.
Tampa Bay is the team that I think in the NFC, because I think the NFC is wide open. I would not be shocked to see them make a Super Bowl run. They have the talent. They've got the defense. They've got the offense. They've got the weapons. You've got Brady's leadership. Whether he can coexist with Arians or not has yet to be seen now, because it seems like there's a little bit of friction there. But I think Tampa Bay is as viable a Super Bowl candidate out of the NFC as any other team out there.
I agree. Simply because of the talent and the coaching. If it all comes together at the same time, they could easily make a Super Bowl run. Completely agree with that. So yeah. All right, now I feel better about my Bucs pick. So I'm going to stick to Tampa Bay there. Let's move on to the Sunday afternoon games. New York Jets at the Seattle Seahawks. So here's a good get-right game for the Seahawks. After losing to one of the New York teams, let's go play the other one, Jersey B. Jamal Adams revenge game?
I think it's going to be a fairly close game. I think, Seattle's defense isn't good. We saw Darnold actually put up some points last week. He came back. He's getting some touchdowns. Yeah, I think it's going to be a decent game. I think Seattle wins, but I think it winds up being one of these games. It's like 34-21, 34-28, something in that range, where it's not a blowout. It doesn't wind up being boring because they're putting up points, but I don't think Seattle's that good.
I think a lot of their weaknesses have been exposed in the past few weeks. But I think Jamal Adams, I joked that it's his revenge game, but of all these others' revenge games, Des Bryant, when they played the Cowboys, they haven't gone so well. But Jamal Adams is different. There was a very public spat that he had with the Jets. He was demanding to be traded for a long time. It was just all out there in the open, and he's such a talented player. And the Jets don't have good pass protection. I could see him wrecking that game single-handedly. So I do think the Seahawks are going to win, and I just have a feeling that Adams will make a big play as a middle finger to the Jets. Moving on to the Indianapolis Colts at the Las Vegas Raiders. So we're talking about playoff seeding. Here's two teams where the playoffs. Talking about playoffs. But these two teams are right there. We went over the playoff standings a little while ago. This is a game that the Raiders have to win more than the Colts. Not just because the Colts are ahead of them by one game, but I just think the Colts are more balanced. I think the Colts have. Their defense is certainly very good. They got DeForest Buckner back. He was out for a week. Darius Leonard has been phenomenal as a linebacker there. And Rivers has been efficient. He's not a superstar, but he's doing what he needs to do to help that team win. The Raiders are more volatile. They're more up and down, and they technically won, but they should have lost to the Jets, and they got blown out by the Falcons 2 weeks ago. So the Raiders need this more than the Colts. I trust Indianapolis more, so I'm going to pick Indianapolis here.
I'm going to go with Indianapolis too. I like you said, I like their defense a lot. I'm not a big fan of Phillip Rivers back there, so it wouldn't surprise me to see him crap the bed and let the Raiders stay in the game. But I really like Indianapolis's defense. Them picking up DeForest Buckner was a huge pickup for them, and yeah, I don't see Las Vegas. God, it's hard for me to say Las Vegas. I don't see the Raiders. I don't see the Raiders pulling off the victory there. But they've surprised me.
I trained myself. I trained myself to say Las Vegas, not Oakland. And you're from the Bay Area. This is probably even harder for you.
Right.
But yeah, Rivers could always pull a Rivers and just like throw 3 picks because he just goes crazy and wants to win the game single-handedly. But they've done a good job keeping him in good situations, and I think Indy wins this. Green Bay at Detroit. So I am picking the Packers, but I don't think it's going to be the blowout that maybe that it looks like on paper. And here's why. So I picked Detroit to beat Chicago this week. I said it was going to be, I think every single team that's fired a coach this year, the interim coach has won their first game. So Romeo Crennel did it with the Texans. Raheem Morris did it with the Falcons. And Darrell Bevell did it with Detroit, where they came back and won that game. Especially in this scenario, these players have been on the record, multiple players saying that they didn't really like playing for Matt Patricia. You get that kind of the monkey off your back. It's free. Darrell Bevell is an offensive-minded coach. They put up 34 points against a good Bears defense. So I do think they'll put up some points. Green Bay's defense is not, gangbusters by any means, especially their run defense. So, but I still think Green Bay will pull it off, but I don't think this will be a division game. I think it'll be close.
I agree with you on Green Bay. I don't agree with you on it being close. I think Green Bay is going to win this game handily.
So, and it looks like that on paper. And I would agree with that sentiment if Patricia was still the coach. But I just believe, we were talking about motivation and yes, these players get paid millions and their job is to go out there and do what they're supposed to do. And they get bonuses based on sacks and whatnot. But when you play for a guy that you believe in, or you play for a guy who's better than the guy who you didn't believe in, it just gives you a little bit extra pep in your step. So I think Detroit will come to play. I don't think they'll be able to hang with Green Bay in the long run, but I think it'll be close.
Yeah, I think
that being said,
I think they'll be motivated to stop Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones. They just won't be able to. So
that's true. Very, very good point. The Detroit Lions do have a bad defense. So let's move on to your San Francisco 49ers at the Washington football team, who's red hot right now, who I picked to beat the Steelers last week, but you'll be pleased to know, and I'm not doing this just because you're my guest on the show, I am picking San Francisco. I feel that they are going to make the plays that they need to. Washington is not a talent-rich team. They have a good defense, but a lot of it is relied on just being smart and playing efficient, and that only gets you so far. And Kyle Shanahan is going to find ways to exploit that defense to get his receivers open. I think this could be an ugly game, so turnovers on both sides, but I just have a feeling that the 49ers will pull it out in the end.
That makes one of us.
We're disagreeing on a lot. That's good.
Yeah,
we have completely.
Yeah, we are. I really like Washington's defensive line. I don't like the Niners' offensive line. I don't like Mullins back there. I think Alex Smith is better than Mullins. I like Washington. I just don't think Mullins is going to be able to do much. I've watched every game. I have a friend who's a diehard Washington fan, so I watch them more than most teams. And every time this year when they've gone up against a bad offensive line, and right now our offensive line is bad, they've dominated. And with a bad offensive line and a bad quarterback back there, I like Washington a lot here. Not only do I like them a lot, I think they're going to win convincingly.
Yeah, I can totally see that, and don't blame you for that pick. Atlanta Falcons at the Los Angeles Chargers. This is another game that was actually hard for me to pick. And I actually went with the Falcons because of coaching. I think Raheem Morris, who's been a head coach in the past, he was a coach of the Bucs many years ago when he was younger, has done a good job rallying those Falcons. I mean, they're out of it. Their season's done. And he may or may not get the full-time head coach job next season, but he's done a good job getting the team ready for games this year. They were competitive against the Saints in both the games, even though they lost. And the Chargers, as talented as they are with certain weapons they have on both sides of the ball, I just think they'll find a way to lose it. And I'm going to go with Atlanta.
I'm going to go with the Chargers, and this pick is probably actually more from the heart. Like I mentioned, I became a big fan of Justin Herbert this year. Helped carry me for many weeks, and I'm ready for him to have a bounce back game. And Atlanta's defense seems like the perfect opportunity to do that. So I'm going to pick the Chargers here to bounce back from their whooping last week.
Well, sneak preview, when we get to the fantasy section, there will be a lot of Chargers players on there. So I completely see him having a bounce back, whether they win or not. I just feel like Atlanta will win the game, but I do think that could end up being a shootout and could be an entertaining game. We mentioned briefly earlier the New Orleans Saints against the Jalen Hurts-led Philadelphia Eagles. Not going to give a lot of analysis here. I'm picking the Saints. Hopefully Hurts makes it somewhat entertaining, but I just don't see the Eagles having a chance.
Yep, I agree with that 100%. And my analysis is about the same. They're just better.
Right, just better. On to the next one. This is, on paper at least, looks to be probably the game of the week. So we've got the Pittsburgh Steelers coming off the first loss of the season against the Buffalo Bills at 9-3, and clearly one of the best teams in the AFC. This will determine playoff seeding, because I think both these teams are, even though they haven't technically locked up, both of these teams are making the playoffs. So the winner of this game could be in a prime position to get a better seed. I think Buffalo is going to win this. I think Buffalo is the better team overall. Here's why. And this is why I actually picked Washington to win last week. Pittsburgh has an amazing defense, but I have been weary of their offense all year. They have weapons, obviously Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, Juju. You've got plenty of weapons to throw to. They don't have a good running game. James Conner has not been efficient all year, to the point where they've kind of given up on the running game, and they just have Big Ben. I think he threw 50 plus passes against Washington, and Ben is turned into a different quarterback than he was earlier in his career, where he was launching deep and just playing pitch and catch with Antonio Brown. He's much more efficient, get the ball out quickly. He's a different kind of quarterback, more Drew Brees-like, actually. And I don't think that holds up against the Bills. I think the Bills will find a way to score, and I think they're just going to ultimately score more than Pittsburgh. I know that sounds like analysis 101. Buffalo will score more. What I mean is I believe in Buffalo's offense more than I believe in Pittsburgh's offense, and that's why I'm picking the Bills in this.
Again, I'm going to pick opposite. Yeah, I'm going to go with Pittsburgh here. I like.
I love it.
Yeah, I like, and similar reasoning to what you said. Although I like Pittsburgh's defense more than I like Buffalo's offense, is what it comes down to. And Buffalo's weakness on defense, at least from what I saw against the Niners, because their run defense looked pretty damn good, was passing. And like you said, the Pittsburgh's offensive strength right now is Big Ben and those three receivers. So I just think Pittsburgh matches up well here against Buffalo.
Totally get it. And I could definitely see this game going either way. Really looking forward to watching that. That is, as I mentioned on paper, could be the most entertaining and most exciting game of the week, certainly with the biggest implications. And finally, finish it off with Monday night. The Ravens, I feel like their last 6 games have been in prime time for a team that's 6-5, right?
Wednesday afternoon prime time.
Wednesday, I guess that's a good point. Well, still, that's not been a Sunday. They have not played on Sunday at a normal scheduled time in a while. So they are playing division rival Cleveland Browns. So the Browns are hot, coming off that win against the Titans. The Ravens looks like they're going to take care of business against the Cowboys. They actually played in week 1, and the Ravens just stomped the Browns. But these two teams are in completely different positions than they were in week 1. Different progress from each of these teams. Baltimore has lost a number of games. Cleveland has been winning. I'm feeling it. Let me pick Cleveland. I'm going to pick the Browns in this one. I think it's going to be a slugfest. It's the AFC North. They're always slugfest games. But I'm riding the Browns train. I'm sure that train will go off the tracks and throw me into the water, but I'm going to pick Cleveland. What about you?
I'm going Baltimore. Like you mentioned, they absolutely stomped Cleveland earlier this year. I think Cleveland's real strength is their ability to set up their pass by running the ball. Even in this past week against Tennessee, I know they got out to a huge lead against Tennessee. Watching that game, I saw a lot of errors on Tennessee's part. Baker Mayfield is not bad. He just doesn't impress me. And even in this past week, when people are saying, "Oh, it was his come out game," if you watched it, he hit wide open receivers. I expect you to be able to hit wide open receivers. It's not him making.
Yeah, Tennessee's pass defense is awful.
Well, and again, they were making mistakes. I mean, it was this is the first game I watched him really in depth. But yeah, Cleveland's receivers were wide open the whole game. So yeah, I don't think Baltimore is going to allow that to happen. They're not going to put up those kind of points. They're going to get pressure on. They're going to stop Cleveland's running game and get pressure on Baker Mayfield, and that's not going to work so well for Baker. I think that's why he lost the first game and why he's going to lose this one.
Tune in next week to see which one of us is right, because we picked almost complete opposite across the board, which is awesome. I love it. I will remind the listeners that as long as Baltimore doesn't blow their lead now, I will finish at 12-3 for my picks for last week. One of us is going to have a good week in picks. We will see which one.
Vegas has a weird way of balancing everything out.
This is true. So I teased it earlier, but now we really are going to get into the fantasy section. So before we get into our DFS picks of the week at each position that we do each week on the podcast, you have a unique fantasy football league that you're a part of, and you told me about it, and I've heard of all different kinds. Matthew Berry, who's a fantasy football analyst, has written articles about the various different kinds of leagues that are out there, and yours was one that I had not heard of specifically before, and it was fascinating. So before we jump into the DFS picks, why don't you tell the listeners exactly what it entails in your what do you call it, the Guillotine League?
Yeah, so I do a Guillotine League, and then I actually do a second one that's pretty unique as well. So I'll kind of describe both of them, and if you want to edit it out later, you can edit it out.
No, let's hear it.
So the Guillotine League is easier to explain. It's a 17-team league. At the end of each week, the bottom team gets eliminated. So once they get eliminated, all of their players become free agents. And so, every team starts out with the same number. We get 1,000 bidding bucks to start the year, and it's just about a lot of it is strategy, roster management. Like there is with any fantasy football, but it just takes on a different element. It's not so much, hey, try. At least my strategy for this week. Now, in full disclosure, this is my second year in the league. Second year it's been running. Last year I was the first one out. So I didn't get the opportunity to play a whole lot last year, although I was sitting there following it, and I was upset because I swear
that's painful.
Well, and not only that, what wound up eliminating me, or the reason I was eliminated, was because I wasn't paying attention, and the kicker that I had on my team didn't play at all week one. He wound up getting hurt and didn't play at all, and I wound up getting eliminated by 2 points. So I was a little bitter about that. This year, my draft was horrible, but I managed to stay in there, and make some great waiver wire pickups. Justin Herbert was a huge one for me. Before that, I was kind of shuffling around quarterbacks. I was waiting for one of the teams with one of the real top quarterbacks to lose so that I could, spend whatever money I needed to try and get that quarterback.
The waiver, is it a budget system? Is that how you do waivers?
Yeah. So we all got $1,000 to start the year, and that's been a big part of my strategy is, and obviously, trying to keep as much of that money as you can for the end, because we're going to get down to it. And if you're one of the last two teams, the other unique thing about this league is it's winner take all. You can get eliminated the first week and get nothing. You can get eliminated the last week and get nothing. So
that might hurt more if you get
right. Well, and last year, like I said, last year was the first year, and that the last three people essentially agreed to chop it up. So I mean, they still played for a win, but they said, hey, second place will get $100, third place will get $50, something like that, just so that nobody left with nothing at that point, because they were like, no, we don't want to just walk away with nothing at this point. That was their call.
Makes sense.
As a poker player, I'm kind of opposed to that. So we'll let it ride.
I'm a huge poker player. I never chop.
Yeah,
pots,
exactly.
So,
yeah. So we'll see how that goes. But at this point, there's one team in there that I think is the team to beat, primarily because they have the most money. Unless, in fact, looking at the score now, I'm sure that it's already happened. I was going to say, unless Justin Tucker, blew out his knee in warm-ups, I knew which team was going to get eliminated. And so, who is it? Aaron Jones and McCaffrey are the two big names that are going to wind up becoming free agents.
Oh, wow.
After this week. And I don't have much money. So there's one, actually, I think I've got the second most money, but I've got, $31 left at this point. And one team has almost $200. So he's going to be able to pick up whoever he wants. That's going to be a tough team to beat. And that's been the strategy all along. Like, it doesn't do you any good to hold on to that money if you get eliminated. So, you spend what you have to make it to the next week. But on the other hand, when you get down to the last 2 and 3 teams, you're all going to have super stocked rosters. So it's about, trying to get those players that you can afford. So all along, I've kind of had my eye on trying, who do I want as my final roster, and trying to make sure I get them as they come up. Funny thing is, I've built a great team now, but I haven't got any of those players yet. I just picked up Alvin Kamara last week. He was one for a long time, and now he's on the downswing. So I'm not even sure that I want him as one of them, but it is what it is. Last 3 weeks, I've had the highest scores. Things are looking good.
Well, there's talk of Breeze possibly coming back.
That's what I'm hoping, because I picked up Michael Thomas on the cheap too, because of the year he was having. So I picked up Michael Thomas recently, Kamara. One of the other big picks I made a few weeks ago was Chubb while he was still out. Chubb is a phenomenal running back. I love Chubb.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, that's supremely fascinating. Like, I want to find a guillotine league next year, or maybe start my own.
Hey,
I love that concept.
if we get an opening, I'll let you know.
Awesome. I'm in if there is one. So tell me about this other league then. What's your second
So
league?
the other league is one we call a marathon league. And the concept is you can start any player you want on any given week, but you can only start each player once. It's not a head-to-head matchup. So, and because of that format, you can have as many teams in there as you want. Last year, I think we had almost 50 teams. This year, with COVID and everything, I think we're down to 38. So it's a 38-team league. For the first 12 weeks, it's a cumulative score. And so really, and I found that it helps a lot with DFS because you're doing the same type thing. You're looking for matchups.
Right.
What I generally try and do is I figure out, okay, who are my top 10 quarterbacks? Who are my top 15 running backs, 15 wide receivers? Because again, you can only start each player once, and that includes the playoffs. So you have a 12-team cumulative score or 12-week cumulative season. At the end of that 12 weeks, the top half of the league makes the playoffs. The other half is eliminated. Then you have a 4-week playoff run. So it winds up becoming, again, that balancing act throughout the entire season where you're like, okay, I want to save my best players for the end, but it doesn't matter if I save my best players if I don't make it to the end, if I get eliminated before the playoffs. So this year was kind of my worst year in the league so far in that the players that I wanted to save, I didn't have the luxury of being able to save them. Going into week 12, which is our cutoff week, I was like 12 points below the cutoff line. It's amazing to me how no matter how many teams we have in there winds up being like between a 200 and a 300 point separation from number one and the end. So, there's a huge variance each week. So basically I went all out. I started Mahomes, Watson, Tyreek Hill. These guys all blew up and had great weeks. So the flip side of it was I had the highest score for the week, made it into the playoffs. The downside is there was a bunch of players.
You can't use those guys.
No, I wanted to save all those guys for the playoffs, and now I don't have any. What makes it really challenging is it's a high scoring league for quarterbacks, and you have to start two quarterbacks each week. So that's where a huge part of the strategy comes in, is figuring out your quarterbacks, and because obviously at the end of a 16-week season you've used 32.
Yeah, that's true. So you have to use every starting quarterback at some point throughout the season if you make it.
It doesn't usually work that. I mean, so for me, one of my strategies every year is I
guess there's injuries.
Exactly.
Quarterbacks come in.
Yeah, I try to start people that I'm like they're not going to be playing later in this year. So I felt like a genius. Week 1 this year, I played Trubisky and Tyrod Taylor, and then by week 3 they were both out. I'm like, look, I'm so smart, but. Yeah, I really enjoy that league. And again, it's one of these things that I've heard you guys talk, you and some of the other guests talk about in previous weeks. I love the drafts. I love getting involved in the drafts as you're drafting teams. I love having something to follow each week because I'm sitting here watching the games. What happens to me, because I have a family and job and everything else, is like I just can't follow the waiver wire that closely. So I don't always have the flexibility to get on Wednesday night and be able to do that. Now, for the musical chairs league, I absolutely have to, and it makes it a little bit easier because you say, hey, these 16 players just got eliminated this week. Who do I want to bid on? Instead of trying to find the deep flyers and everything else as much as you do in other fantasy leagues. So yeah, I enjoy the marathon league because I can stay up late Saturday night, get up Sunday morning, look for my matchups, figure out who I want to start. I don't have to worry about the waiver wires. It's
like DFS,
yeah,
like you said.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's use that to segue into our weekly DFS picks. I think that honestly was fascinating. I'd not heard either of those types of leagues before. Thank you for sharing. Definitely went in on the guillotine league if there's a spot. And if not, I think I'll start my own, as I said. So here, let's go to our daily fantasy picks of the week. I call this our hires and flyers. Hire being a player that is higher priced but is poised with a good matchup and should still produce to match that price. And a flyer is the opposite of that. Somebody who's priced lower at their position, but due to opportunity, due to matchup, should be poised for a good week, and you should be able to get more value at a lower price. So I've got some picks at each of these positions. I believe you do as well, Jay, correct?
I do.
Awesome. So we'll go position by position. I'll share my hire and my flyer, and then you can do the same. So at quarterback, I hinted to this a little bit earlier. My hire is Justin Herbert, playing against the Falcons, who have a very bad secondary. Taysom Hill just had his best game as a passer. Actually looked pretty good throwing the ball against that Atlanta secondary. Herbert has been fantastic all year, with exception to the last game, which he was playing a Belichick-led defense. He's not playing a Belichick defense this time, so I think Herbert has a big bounce-back game and puts up some monster numbers. My flyer for the week is Mike Glennon versus that Titans defense, that pass secondary we just mentioned, who Baker Mayfield just torched them. So if Baker Mayfield is not known as a prolific passer, is going to throw 4 touchdowns, Mike Glennon can squeeze a couple out, and at that lower price, the Jags will be playing from behind because I think Tennessee will have the lead. You could really get some value back from Mike Glennon against Tennessee. What about your QB picks at DMS?
My higher pick is Russell Wilson. We just watched David Carr destroy that Jets defense. Granted, at the last second, and Greg Williams isn't there to help him out this week. But yeah, I mean, David Carr threw up huge points. Quarterback's been throwing up huge points against the Jets defense all year. I think Russell Wilson is a safe higher pick for this week. My flyer pick is actually his opponent this week, which is Sam Darnold. As we talked about a little earlier, I think that Seattle's defense as a whole is not very good. Their secondary, aside from or outside of Jamal Adams, is pretty weak. I think Sam Darnold is starting to come around again. Not much faith in Adam Gase, but I think Sam Darnold has the potential to throw some decent numbers against Seattle.
Great. Totally get both of those picks. Let's move on to running back. My higher pick for the week is Aaron Jones going up against the Detroit Lions and their 32nd ranked run defense. So if there's one thing, whether there's Matt Patricia or not, you can run against the Lions. Coming off a huge game against Philly. And this is just, to me, a no-brainer. He's higher priced. I believe he's the third or fourth priced running back, but against that Lions defense, there's a good chance it's going to pay off. My flyer is J.D. McKissic. So Antonio Gibson got injured in that game against the Steelers. They're not sure if he's going to be able to play next week. McKissic has been putting up value even with Gibson in. So he actually has 15 or more touches in 3 of his last 5 games and a total of, and this is a real number, 45 targets. He's a running back, 45 targets in his last 5 games. And that was with Gibson in. So without Gibson, there's a good chance that his usage is going to go up. And especially in DFS, where you're getting points per reception, half point for FanDuel, 1 point for DraftKings, I think J.D. McKissic is great at the price. What about you?
I hadn't considered J.D. McKissic, but I like that pick a lot.
You're welcome.
Yeah. On the running back side, I have Derrick Henry as my hire. Again, I think we're going to see a good comeback game for him against that horrible Jags rushing defense. To me, that one seemed like a no-brainer. I see him putting up his Derrick Henry like 120 to 150 yards with a touchdown or 2 there. My flyer is Chase Edmonds. Again, a little bit of a sentimental pick. Chase Edmonds has had some big games for me this year when I needed them most. I think against that Giants D, I think they're going to do a decent job shutting down Kenyon Drake, which will, I think we're going to see a decent number of targets and receptions to Chase Edmonds this week.
Great. Moving on to wide receiver. Sticking with the Chargers game, I have Keenan Allen, who was just shut down by Stephon Gilmore playing the Patriots, going up against that bad Falcons D. And even with the shutdown, I believe he was targeted like 9 or 10 times still by Herbert. So even when he's not producing, Herbert is still looking his way. So now you're going up against a really bad pass defense, looking for a bounce back game. I still think Atlanta will win, but I think he's probably going to get 12 or 13 targets, 9 or 10 catches, and he's poised for a really big game. Keenan Allen against Atlanta. And my flyer, Colin Johnson, wide receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars versus that bad Titans defense. So both of my higher and my flyer wide receivers actually can stack with their respective quarterbacks. So Colin Johnson is a rookie wide receiver. Since Mike Glennon has taken over the starting job the last 2 weeks, 14 targets, 8 receptions, 162 yards, and a touchdown with Glennon as the starter. And he's dirt cheap in FanDuel and DraftKings. You stack him with Glennon, you're going to have a lot of money left over for the rest of your roster. Who do you have at wide receiver?
I have the same higher pick in Keenan Allen. Again, for the same reasons you did, going up against that trash Atlanta secondary, and Justin Herbert certainly seems to like Keenan Allen. My flyer is actually on the other side of the field there, being Mike Williams. I think Mike Williams is getting great value against that Atlanta defense. And again, I think Justin Herbert's going to have that bounce back game we both referred to. I like Mike Williams as my flyer.
Let's move on to tight end. Sticking with that same game, somebody's gonna light it up in this game. I've got Hunter Henry versus the Falcons, so he's another one that even when Allen is putting up numbers and Mike Williams getting targets, Hunter Henry is still getting his share of targets. Really, over the last 3 or 4 games, he did get shut down against New England, but they all got shut down against New England. Another bounce back game, another stack with Justin Herbert. Hunter Henry against the Atlanta Falcons, awful secondary, and my flyer is Cole Kmet versus the Texans. So 10 targets for 6 catches and a touchdown with Trubisky starting. Cole Kmet is another rookie. Is another one who's, like Colin Johnson, has really seen his value tick up with a new quarterback. So Trubisky came in, 10 targets, 6 catches, and a touchdown in the last 2 games, and he's dirt cheap. So that's my flyer pick at tight end.
Well, my hire is, again, the same one as yours. I think we're in agreement that the Atlanta secondary is not very good and going to be able to cover these wide receivers at tight end. So I got Hunter Henry versus
Hashtag analysis.
There you go. My flyer is Jimmy Graham. Good old trusty Jimmy. I think at the price I saw him at, I think he's giving great value as a potential cheap alternative at tight end.
We're aligned. Oh, Jimmy Graham. It's one of the tight ends for the Bears against the Texans.
There you go.
Makes a good flyer pick. Yes. So pick your poison, Cole Kmet or Jimmy Graham against Houston. And finally, let's move to defensive special teams. So the hire, I talked about the Jamal Adams revenge game. So if you want to pay up for a defense, what better defense than the Seattle defense against the New York Jets? Seattle defense obviously hasn't been great this year, but I could easily see them forcing Darnold to some turnovers, Jamal Adams getting a few sacks. You decide whether it's worth the price to pay up, but there is an opportunity there for them to maybe get a defensive touchdown. And my flyer pick, I mentioned it earlier, picking the Panthers D versus the Broncos. This is mainly a pick against Drew Lock. Lock has just been prone to making some really poor decisions and has had multiple games with multiple interceptions. That's all you need when you're picking a defense. It's just an opportunity, a defense that's going to get some sacks, has a possibility for turnovers. The Panthers do have a few defensive touchdowns this year. That's my flyer pick. What about you?
My higher defensive pick is what I alluded to earlier, and I'm going with the football team over my beloved 49ers. Like I said, they were really when I ran through the list, they weren't even necessarily on the higher price range, but they were the one I see getting the most points out of that kind of upper level of teams. I've watched them beat up on teams with bad offensive lines and bad quarterbacks, in games prior this year. And unfortunately, that describes the 49ers right now. So I'm going with the Washington football team as my hire, and my flyer is the Bengals against the Cowboys, who have looked so horrible this year.
Yeah, that's actually a solid pick because the Cowboys have had, Zeke hasn't been the same this year. Andy Dalton's their quarterback. They have an awful offensive line. So all you need to do is break through for a few sacks, maybe force a fumble. I really like your flyer pick at defense. Might end up starting Cincy in a few of my lineups this week. Well, you came, you saw, you conquered. How do you feel? How you feeling? You want to jump into some politics next?
Yeah, let's do some politics.
So thank you everybody for joining in. If you're just interested in the football talk, we will see you again next week. Enjoy the games this weekend. If you want to stick around for the politics, we will be bringing Jay back. We'll drop the politics episode probably in a couple days. Thanks again. If you get a chance, would love to hear from you. We're starting to get some listener feedback. Actually, one of the reasons that we changed the format today is because we got some direct feedback. So leave your reviews. Would really appreciate your subscriptions. We want to hear from you. You can email me at pigskinsandpolitics@gmail.com. Would love to hear from you in the reviews and the emails. You can find me on social media. Thanks again for joining me. Stick around for politics and enjoy the games this weekend.